Welcome everyone. This is our weekly webinar for the MOSOMELT CMOOC, the Mobile Social Media Learning Technologies CMOOC, and we're into week 5. So we're streaming along. We've only got a couple of weeks left. So if you're wanting to catch up, then you'll have to be quick. But we will, of course, do this again either later this year or next year. So welcome to our discussion participants this morning. We have on my left Raj.
Hello.
So great to have you there, Raj.
Thank you.
And Lisa.
Hi, everyone.
We have Neil all the way from Japan.
Good morning.
I would, say konnichiwa, but I'll probably just embarrass myself.
No, you did well.
Paul all the way from Nelson.
Hi.
And of course myself here in Auckland. So week 5, we're kind of looking at the topic really is post-PowerPoint pedagogy, which is really trying to explore, I suppose, teaching and learning beyond the, chalk and talk. How do we get much more interactive? How do we get much more student-centered and get beyond perhaps the traditional sort of Linus blanket of PowerPoint and just broaden our horizons, be a little bit more, take some risks in our teaching and learning practice and see if we can push the boundaries that will stretch our students a bit more. So that's kind of the idea of where we're at this week. So I'll just launch into a little bit of screen sharing and we'll just go through this week's activities. And where are we? Choose the right window. There we go. Right. Oh, did I push present to all? No, I didn't. There we go. Okay, so we're on the WordPress hub. And you can see we're on week 5, post PowerPoint pedagogy. I quite like it because it's 3 Ps, a bit of alliteration there.
Very good, Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thanks, Paul. So that's obviously copyright phrase. So anyone quotes that, please copyright us. No, I'm just joking. We are into open scholarship and open practice, so willing to share. So the first thing that we suggested was the survey. Now, I know there's quite a few people who haven't done the survey yet because obviously I can see the stats, but we have done this several times, and so we do have a list of stats there already, so I thought we'd go through those quickly. And of course, there's a bit of overlap with our CMOOC because we do the same survey there as well, so you might have already done this if you've done the CMOOC. So the survey really just to try to get people thinking, try to get them thinking about teaching and learning and technology and their current practice and perhaps how they could extend that a little bit. So it's just a bit of context to start with. What types of context do people teach in? Predominantly face-to-face in small groups. That's quite interesting. I guess the traditional model of universities is face-to-face in large lectures, although it's only a little bit behind. But it's good to see that small groups are edging that out now. I think there's a bit of a culture shift at most universities to move away from large lectures if they can. Of course, it's based on economics. Not so many fully online. That's probably a reflection of AUT participants because we really do little fully online. We're really much more around blended learning, so that's much higher. I know that does vary, particularly for someone like Neil. I think, Neil, you're basically all fully online, aren't you?
Well, I have two hats. One is as a university teacher, and nothing is online. And then there's creating online courses outside of that, of course, and they're all online. But the two are different, yeah. Yep.
So how did you answer that question?
I think I put other.
I think you might have. I think there was a comment there I thought must be from you.
Yeah.
So question 2, and this is just to sort of set the groundwork, I suppose. This is a presentation tool such as PowerPoint or Keynote. So any sort of slide-based presentation tool, your main teaching tool, and pretty much it is although the no's are 42%. That's reasonably higher than I would have expected, but that's good. Question 3, what are your main reasons for using a presentation tool like PowerPoint? Well, there's obviously a few reasons. The one that's edging them all out is I know how to use it. So it's I guess that's my perception of PowerPoint, is it's very teacher-centric. It's like I said at the beginning, it's a bit of a, and I have been criticized for saying this before, but it's a bit of a Linus blanket, a safety sort of feature for you as a teacher, because you know that you push the next button, it's going to go to your next slide and you can read it. And you're not going to look too silly in front of the class. Which, obviously you want to feel safe as a teacher, but that's not really pushing the boundaries of teaching and learning. Focus attention, well, yeah, it does, because you've got bullet points. Some people use PowerPoint very creatively. I've seen it done in a collaborative way where it's been interactive and people done like polls embedded in it. People have done, tables that they've done live, etc. But I've got to say, the majority of presentations I've seen are pretty much, you could have just sat there and read the slides yourself. Obviously, one of the other ones, the other key one there is it looks professional. And notwithstanding the fact that students actually demand it. So that's a key finding from several large surveys done, particularly in the UK, by JISC. They've done. You can look at the. I think I've got some references there on the blog post, but just did a lot of surveys of school leavers and their expectations of technology at university level. What did they expect technology to be once they got to university? And they expected teachers to use PowerPoint. We also tend to get that comment quite heavily in student surveys. They want the PowerPoint files because all the answers are in the PowerPoint. So it's a bit of a culture change, really. If you're going to step beyond that, you need to, I guess, scaffold your students as well, because that's what they expect, and they don't really expect anything else, which is a bit sad, really. So question 4, what are the key disadvantages of a presentation tool? Well, I was a bit surprised that I suppose the issue of forcing students to buy, a Microsoft package is quite low, but I guess most universities now provide it for free for students anyway. Certainly in earlier days, meant students had to go out and buy an expensive software package. The key one that people picked up on is it's teacher-centered. So welcome to comment, people, as we go along. Obviously, I'm interpreting this through my lens. In your opinion, does a presentation tool such as PowerPoint reinforce particular pedagogy? So what most people said yes, and most of the responses were teacher-centric. There were a few people who said it's just a tool and it's up to how you use it. And I've certainly had some people say, I use PowerPoint extremely creatively. I still dispute that from the evidence of what I've seen. What tools do you regularly use in lectures? So this is interesting, because if we go back to, is PowerPoint your main tool? There's less than 60% there, but what do people actually use? Well, according to this, it's almost 80% use PowerPoint. So someone's lying, or perhaps they use PowerPoint a little bit as part of a tool set. I don't know. But interesting that there's not a lot of other stuff being used, at least not as much as what PowerPoint has been used. So some people use the LMS, about 40%. So I'm always really interested to see how people engage with online in the class. And I've got to say, most of it is snapshots, screenshots of the online environment within PowerPoint. Very few people take the risk of going live. Now, that may be because they're worried about the internet connection falling over, etc. Or, it's just maybe that safety issue. I don't know. But it seems to me if you're going to use online learning, then you should use online rather than a screenshot of online environments. And there's a fair bit of other there. What type of interactive collaborative tools do you use to facilitate student interaction? So trying to get people to share some of their practice ideas. So oral questions, that's very powerful. I mean, I guess that's probably my key tool when I'm teaching in a class.
Share some of their practice ideas.
So someone's just turned on their audio.
Oral questions.
So yeah, just asking questions in class, I think it's very, very powerful, and you can design questions to be very student-centered and get them really thinking. Group work, it's great to see that being so high there, 83%. And then perhaps some other tools like polling, some video streaming, and there's a whole variety of other tools there, and probably a few that we haven't thought of. So now trying to actually sort of bridge that to foundational learning theory. And I guess that's the key of the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning and Scholarship of Technology Enhanced Learning, is we want people to think about learning theory. Why are they making the choices and designing the curriculum the way they are? Is it just because it's the way they've always done it? Is it because they think it works? Or is it because learning theory backs it up? So I'm just trying to get people thinking here. So what learning theories and frameworks do you associate with your own teaching practice? So there's a variety there. Quite pleased to see the highest is social constructivism. And there is a bit of behaviorism there. And I think Neil made an important comment that he's teaching language. And so you need quite a certain amount of cognitive recall for something like learning language. But then I think your comment was, Neil, that you then go on to very problem-based learning based around that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right. Can I just ask a question at this?
Sure.
Amongst all of those learning theories or approaches, there isn't flipped learning, and I just wonder if that's a sort of that's a pretty common term nowadays, and is kind of aimed at switching lectures to small groups and looking at videos at home and then coming in and discussing it in the classroom and that kind of thing. Is that a common term in your fields?
Well, yes, it is, but I guess I wouldn't call that a learning theory or a learning framework as such. I guess that's more a methodology, an implementation of a learning theory. The learning theory being about social constructivism, constructionism, etc. Flipped learning is one way of putting those into practice. So I haven't put that there as a learning theory because I don't think it's actually a learning theory itself. It's more of a practice way of putting those into practice.
I agree with you. I just wondered if somewhere in the survey, perhaps in the future,
Sure, yeah. I think that's a good idea. Perhaps I need to put that up here under interactive. What ways do you get to, what types of approaches do you use? Good point. And then the last question, what was the last question? No, there's one more question. So what are people just trying to express see if they could actually put into words what their teaching philosophy is? And that's really interesting to see some of the comments that are there. It's great to see some people really.
Brilliant one at the top there.
Yeah, I wonder who did that. It's quite short.
Yeah.
Very concise. I have had the one or two comments around, I disagree with this completely, but I think most people are open to sort of think through their teaching practice and reframe it around learning theory. And then where would you place your teaching approach on a continuum between teacher-directed pedagogy, so reframing the concept of pedagogy back to its root, which is kind of teaching children as such, if you go back to the Greek, which is very directed learning. Although my wife is actually a kindergarten teacher, and most of her approach is extremely student-based and very social constructivist. So looking at various different ways of problem-based learning, etc. Kindergarten, it's not really associated with level as such. Student-centered andragogy, which tends to be more adult teaching, and then hudagogy. And if you haven't come across the term before, it's by Stuart and Hayes and Chris Kenyon. came up with this about 2001. It's about student-determined learning. So it's about students negotiating learning process and outcome and driving that rather than being teacher-directed. And so it's a bit of a continuum between the three, because I think it's always going to be a bit of a mix. But most people there are sort of in the student-centered sort of area of it. So yeah, interesting results. So the next thing that we suggested was we did a webinar with one of our lecturers, Laurent Antonchik, who's actually French, but spends most of his time here in New Zealand. He's a very creative type. So we had a really interesting webinar with him where he talked about some of his ideas of really trying to be creative and having some practical strategies for using social media and teaching and learning. So we just link back to that for people if they wanted to have a watch of that. Did anyone do that?
Sorry.
No, okay. Well, you still got time. It's still there. So, yeah, be good. It'd be interesting to get your feedback on what you thought of that discussion. And then just a little bit of a brief discussion around some resources around learning theory to try and extend people a bit. Eric Mazur has done a lot of research, which is really good because he comes from a scientific field of teaching and learning, of teaching practice. And so that's often a domain where it's very teacher directed, but his research has really sort of exploded that to basically explore what are the limits of the large lecture format and how can you actually make it work better. So interesting research that his PhD students actually did, where they did some brain tracking. So they put some like sensors on a large group of people and measured their brain activity and right throughout a day and compared their brain activity during different things they were doing throughout the day. One of those was being in a large lecture, which was very teacher-centric. Another was, obviously sleeping. Another was watching TV. And it was interesting to see the brain activity during a large lecture was the least of any other activity, including sleep.
Including sleep.
Yeah, including sleep. So students were actually much more engaged when they're sleeping than when they're in a large lecture because they're sort of being creative and they're dreaming. Whereas their activity during a large lecture was almost like a steady line of nothing. So interesting reading. I suggest you go and have a look at that. So what he actually found was you can change that. You can change that by being interactive in the lecture setting. So, and particularly for women. So his stats showed that as soon as you added any form of interaction into the large lecture format, people suddenly, their brain activity went up because they're having to think, they're having to interact, they're having to collaborate, and that's really just a simple thing. Ask questions in your lecture. Don't just deliver. Do some polls, do something that's interactive, and suddenly that learning process becomes much more engaging and much more powerful. So there's some simple things that you can do in that large lecture setting to make it work much better. Interesting reading. And then we had some examples of some tools that perhaps you may or may not have used before and how you could use them. So, just as I'm talking here, button guys, if you've used any of these and you think they're good or you've got some other suggestions. So one core tool that I use a lot is wireless screen mirroring. So we actually developed some mobile AirPlay screens that we can wheel around. It's just a large screen with an Apple TV on it. And it basically turns your mobile device into a group tool. So all you do is you wirelessly present from your mobile device the screen onto a large screen, and then other people can see it, that you can interact in groups. Suddenly you don't all have to crowd around each other's mobile phone or their iPad or their laptop to engage. And so suddenly your mobile device becomes a group work tool. And so I use that Air Server as a way of facilitating that. The good thing about Air Server is it's cross-platform, so it works with everything. Works on Windows, works on Android, works on iOS, works on Mac. So it's a great level field for sharing. And what you can do this in lecture theatres as well. So if you have an Apple TV or an AirServer software, or they've even got their own hardware now linked up to your projector, you can get someone in a student in the lecture theatre to share their screen directly with everyone else very, very simply. And once again, it becomes interactive. Share their work. Evernote I love because it works fantastically across all my devices, synchronizes really well, and is once again cross-platform. So we're trying to look at cross-platform tools here, stuff that'll work on basically everything. So I find Evernote a really powerful tool if you haven't used it. Adobe Spark. Now, it's not a tool that I personally use, but I know people who do use it, and I've seen them using it, and it looks really, really cool. And perhaps it's just a little bit of a step up from PowerPoint or Keynote. So it's a presentation tool, but it does force you to sort of rethink your presentation approach. It looks fantastic. It allows you to be a little bit more interactive, and you can do it on your mobile phone even if you want to. Twitter, I find to be a powerful conversational tool, and particularly once you start using hashtags and a hashtag analysis tool. So we use Tags Explorer, which is basically a Google spreadsheet developed by Martin, and I've forgotten his name there, from Alt in the UK, and he's an open educator, and he's shared that with people. You can use his Google spreadsheet and then reformat it around your own hashtags. So that's a tool that he's made available for other people. So if you look up Tags Explorer, it's a great analysis tool for Twitter if you're using hashtags. Storify. So if you use Storify, particularly in journalism, for students.
Tom, I think Storify's gone out of business.
Oh, okay. It possibly has.
Click on it. I think you come to a page that says we've gone out of business.
Oh, actually, I think what happened is they got bought out by someone. Yeah. So that, I guess that's kind of
as of the 16th of May, 2018.
Yeah, I should have checked my links. Thanks, Lisa.
That's all right.
So we used to use Storify, but that's part of the nature of social media. Is if you're using a tool for free, you've got, what's the payback for the company? Well, for Google, it's generally they're data mining you. For other companies, it's advertising. They're selling your advertising. For Apple, it's driving you towards their hardware to buy their hardware. And if they can't find a sustainable funding model, then they go out of business. So that's possibly what's happened to Storify. That's life. Another tool I use a lot is Flipboard. It's kind of like a really visual RSS reader. If you used to use RSS, it's kind of semi-died and there's not too many tools left. But I really like it because what it does is it preferences the visual elements of an RSS feed. So when you subscribe to blogs and news sites, it gives you like this magazine format, and I just love it. So particularly in visual domains, using something like Flipboard, people really find it very powerful, particularly if they're a little bit averse to the idea of curating a whole lot of blogs and having to read a whole lot of text. If you use something like Flipboard, it really preferences the visual elements. It then creates this like interactive magazine. You don't have to do anything except subscribe to those blogs and sites. So some other tools I've also suggested there for learning communities. Obviously Google Plus is gone, so I used to have Google Plus there, so I did change that. But perhaps some alternatives are Microsoft Teams, Trello, or Slack. The issue there with all of those is they're not public. So it's difficult to find a public replacement. So what, of course, we've tried to do is our Moodle social forum, and we are finding it a little bit hard to get some interaction going around there, and I'm not really quite sure why. I'd love to get feedback from people. What can we do to get our Moodle forum happening a bit more? So at that point, I'm going to stop screen sharing because I've talked long enough, and I'm surprised I haven't gone, into a coughing fit. But thankfully, I haven't. So, comments, ideas from our erudite panel.
I used Keynote for presenting via an Apple TV, which was actually really good because I could change the slides on my iPhone. If I had my iPad plugged into an Apple TV, I used my iPhone to change slides, which was really good. I saw it presented really, really well by our director at the time, Stanley Freelick, and I thought I can do this. So for my next presentation, I actually did it, and it worked really well. So I've used Keynote before.
Great, thanks, Lisa.
And I'm actually keen to go and have a look at Adobe Spark. So I'm going to give that one a go.
Yeah, download the app. That's the best way to start.
I might have to say goodbye in a minute, but I just noted something I heard in the last week or so. Is Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, has banned PowerPoint from business meetings.
Right. Yeah, I did come across some interesting articles a year or two ago. There's one that blamed PowerPoint for crashing one of the space shuttles.
Really? Really?
Yeah, basically because it choked information into such small bullet points that people didn't get the right information. So during their IT briefings, someone stuffed up and didn't go beyond the PowerPoint slides, and so I think we are, in a lot of ways, by using those sorts of tools, we can be dumbing our students down. Yeah. But, yeah.
And of course, there's the idea of PowerPointless.
Or death by PowerPoint. Yeah.
Death by PowerPoint. Yeah, all the old thing. Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a video on YouTube. It's probably a few years old now about the guy who runs through PowerPoint presentation, and it's just the information that shouldn't be on there.
Hey, Paul. Can I ask a question about, or pose an issue about Moodle, about getting discussion going? I've just started to use Moodle at my school, and I get students to post videos that they make, and then they have to comment on each other's videos. And I do it through a forum, and then when you set up the forum, there's about 5 different options of like a simple forum or a blog forum and so on. I just wondered and I can't figure out which one is the better way to encourage more interaction, but some of them you have to click twice and move from page to page, and others it's just you have an interaction with one person rather than the whole group. So Tom said he was wondering why there's not so much interaction on the Moodle forum, and it may be just that everyone's busy and so on, but it might be. I find it quite difficult to move from one page to another and to know which reply button on which thread I should use. So I'm not saying give me the answer now, but I would love to know what kind of setup would best create more interaction.
I think Paul's probably the expert to ask that. Unfortunately, he's just left. But but we set up ours as social forums, so that's the option we chose. But apparently, the issue with social forums is they don't automatically notify everyone. So we had to go through and change some of the options. So the first couple of weeks, no one was getting notifications, and we had to turn that on because by default, notifying everyone who subscribed to a social forum is off by default, apparently. So you have a different type of forum, which is more announcements based, which obviously has that turned on by default, but that tends to be a little bit more sort of teacher-centric forum. So I think it's just looking through some of the options. I was kind of wondering too whether, the latest version of Moodle, I think that we've got there, forces users to have a very secure password. And looking at some of the logs, I see some people have tried to log in several times and then just given up. And I wonder whether it's because a lot of people have a very basic default password they use for everything. And once they're forced to think of a much more secure password, it becomes a barrier. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it's not a barrier for me personally, but it's more once I'm into the system, I'm not quite exactly sure
where to go. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think having a more threaded discussion would help. So we need to sort of tweak it a bit. Of course, Lisa is our Blackboard expert.
Yes, but the Moodle one is actually the Moodle discussion board. I find there's too many clicks to get into it. So I'm trying to think of a better way to actually get that out to people. It took about 4 or 5 clicks to actually find it and then try and reply on it. Yeah. I hear your pain, Neil. Yeah.
I guess it's always difficult to get, particularly students to interact on in any way. The difference, of course, between getting students to interact and a community practice of peers like what we're doing is that, of course, there is a power relationship there with students. So if they want to get their marks, you assign some marks to that interaction. Of course, if they want to get their marks, they've got to interact. With something like this CMOOC format, which is very open, peer-based, there is no power relationship there, which we don't want anyway. But there's no, I can't force people to interact, and I don't want to. But it's a different sort of way of interacting.
I'm on the TELadvisors network, which is I think it's an Australian one that I think, Tom, you might be on as well.
Colin Simpson, I think.
Colin Simpson, yeah. And I actually get the notifications from that more easily than I do our one, the one that you're on. So maybe we'll have a look at that, Tom, at some stage and just see. See,
you might have signed up with a proper email address for that one, Lisa.
Yes, that would be my AUT email address.
Lisa has 2 Gmail addresses, and we can't figure out which is the right one.
Well, no, I've got one, but for some reason Google doesn't like me and decides to change it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'll sit down with Tom and maybe see if there's a way that we can actually get this more kind of out there.
And any comments from you, Raj? You've been pretty quiet this morning.
Well, I think because I need to be more adventurous. I use a lot of PowerPoint, but I think.
Oh, have I hurt your feelings, Raj?
I think, but I'm very conscious about how I'm using it. So I think that also depends upon how you're using a PowerPoint thing. Hopefully I don't kill my students or learners through my PowerPoint presentations, but I think I need to be a bit more adventurous, and I'll definitely be keen to explore Adobe Spark in near future to see how that goes. You guys are there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, I've just put up a link. Also, sorry, Raj, I've just put up a link about the Death by PowerPoint by Don Macmillan. So have a look at that when you want to have a bit of humour for the afternoon.
I hit a pack. Yes, I'm definitely.
Thanks, Lisa.
It's quite a funny one to watch. It's an old one, but it's a funny one.
Cool. Okay, well, I think we'll wrap it up there. I think my voice is about to give out. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Paul, who's already left. Thank you, Raj, Lisa, Neil. And
Neil, Leah, just to let you know, Neil, I've actually done my video.
Oh, great!
But it's only 45 seconds, and our video guys sped it up, and they've sped it up too much. And I said I can't talk that fast to get my voiceover on it, so we're just going to expand that out to 2 minutes, and I'll be able to put my voiceover on, no problem.
I think we have 1 or 2 others coming as well. They're just in process. Yeah. Okay, thanks, team.
All right.
See you, everyone. Bye.
See you.
Catch you later. Bye.
Bye.